Have you ever wondered what you'd do if you discovered the person you loved most was waiting for you to die? What if your final moments became your greatest weapon? This is the story of a woman who heard the unthinkable and turned her death into the most brilliant revenge you've ever witnessed. If you love stories of justice, karma, and shocking twists that will leave you speechless, then you need to hear what happened next. Subscribe to this channel because we bring you real-life stories that prove truth is stranger than fiction, and this one will haunt you long after it ends. #story. I heard my husband say, as soon as she dies, all the money is mine. I pretended to die. The morphine drip was supposed to make everything hazy, but my mind had never been sharper, and when I heard Marcus say those 7 words that would change everything as he stood just outside my hospital room door speaking to someone on his phone in that low conspiratorial tone he used when he thought no one was listening, and the words came through the crack in the doorway like poison seeping into my veins. As soon as she dies, all the money is mine, and I felt my heart, which the doctors said was failing anyway, crack into pieces so small they could never be put back together, because this was the man I had loved for 23 years, the man I had built an empire with, the man who held my hand through 4 miscarriages and whispered that we were enough, just the 2 of us, and now here he was counting down the hours until my death like a child waiting for Christmas morning, and suddenly every loving gesture, every tender kiss, every tearful vigil at my bedside became a performance, a carefully orchestrated lie, and I realized with horrifying clarity that I had been sharing my life with a stranger who wore my husband's face, and I knew in that moment that I could not let him win, because if there's one thing my mother taught me before she passed, it's that a woman's greatest weapon is not her beauty or her charm, but her ability to think 3 steps ahead when everyone believes she can barely take one. And so I made a decision right there in that sterile hospital room with machines beeping around me and death supposedly knocking at my door. I would give Marcus exactly what he wanted. I would die, or at least I would make him believe I had. And then I would watch from beyond the grave as his perfect plan unraveled thread by thread until there was nothing left but the truth and the consequences he so richly deserved. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before I became a ghost haunting my own life and seeking justice from the shadows of my supposed death. My name is Catherine Westmore, and I built Westmore Technologies from nothing more than a college dorm room idea and a stubborn refusal to accept the word impossible. I wrote code while other girls my age were at parties. I pitched to investors while they vacationed in Europe, and by the time I was 30, I had created a software platform that revolutionized medical record keeping and made me independently wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I met Marcus at a tech conference in San Francisco, where he was working as a pharmaceutical sales representative with charm that could light up a room and ambition that matched my own. And he pursued me with the kind of focused intensity that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. And when he proposed on a beach in Malibu with the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I said yes without hesitation, because I believed I had found not just a partner but a soulmate who understood the language of success and sacrifice. But looking back now with eyes unclouded by love, I can see the signs I missed, how he slowly inserted himself into every aspect of my business, suggesting I make him COO because married couples should build legacies together, how he convinced me to put everything in a joint trust with him as co-trustee because it showed I trusted him completely, how he was always so interested in my will and my estate planning and my succession plans with a concern that seemed loving but now feels predatory and sinister. And then 6 months ago I started getting sick. At first it was just fatigue, which I attributed to stress and too many late nights at the office. Then came the dizzy spells and the nausea and the strange numbness in my extremities, and the doctors ran test after test finding nothing concrete, until finally one brilliant young resident named Dr. Sarah Chan noticed something in my blood work that everyone else had missed: traces of arsenic, not enough to kill quickly but enough to destroy slowly and systematically. And that's when everything clicked into place, because Marcus had been making me special smoothies every morning for the past year, claiming he wanted to help me stay healthy, and I had drunk every single one of them like a lamb walking willingly to slaughter. And Dr. Chan told me quietly that I needed to go to the police immediately, but I couldn't. Because I had no proof, nothing that would stand up in court, just suspicions and circumstantial evidence, and a husband who was so careful, so meticulous that he would never make a mistake that could be traced back to him. And then my condition worsened rapidly, and I was admitted to the hospital, where Dr. Chun became my secret ally and co-conspirator, because she believed me when I told her what I suspected, and she understood that sometimes justice requires unorthodox methods, especially when the legal system moves too slowly to save a dying woman, and When we hatched our plan, a plan so audacious and dangerous that it might just work because Marcus had made one critical error in his calculations. He had underestimated me. He had forgotten that the woman he married didn't. T built a tech empire by playing it safe or accepting defeat, and he had no idea that the morphine drip he was so eager for the doctors to increase was actually saline solution that Dr. Chan had secretly substituted, because she was risking her entire career to help me expose a murderer. And so I lay in that hospital bed pretending to drift in and out of consciousness while my ears were wide open and my mind was recording every visitor, every phone call, every whispered conversation Marcus had when he thought I was too far gone to hear. And what I learned in those days of playing dead, while still breathing, made my blood run cold because Marcus hadn't just been poisoning me. He had been planning this for years, systematically isolating me from friends and family, convincing me to cut ties with my business partners, buying life insurance policies I didn't even know existed, and setting up offshore accounts that would allow him to disappear with my fortune the moment I stopped breathing. And the cruelest part, the part that still makes me want to scream, was discovering that he had a girlfriend named Vanessa, whom he had been seeing for 5 years, a woman he had promised to marry the moment he inherited everything, a woman he had shown pictures of me dying in the hospital bed as proof that his plan was working exactly as intended. And I learned all this because Dr. Chan had planted recording devices in my room, hidden cameras and microphones that captured every moment of Marcus's true self when he thought the only witness was his comatose wife. And the evidence we gathered was devastating: hours of footage showing him on the phone discussing my assets, meeting with lawyers about expediting my death certificate, and even one chilling moment where he stood over my bed and whispered, "You should have just died faster, you selfish bitch. All this fighting is costing me money." And I had to lie there motionless, controlling my breathing, forcing myself not to react, because the moment he knew I could hear him, the moment he suspected I was aware, the whole plan would collapse and he might find a way to finish the job more permanently. And so I waited and I listened and I gathered evidence for what felt like an eternity but was really only 2 weeks, until Dr. Chan told me we had enough to bury him, but we needed one final act, one last performance that would bring everything together and force Marcus to reveal himself completely. And that's when I died, or at least that's what the death certificate said, on a rainy Tuesday morning at 6:42 a.m. with Marcus conveniently absent from the hospital because he had gone home to shower. Dr. Chan officially pronounced me dead and my body was taken to the morgue, where a trusted colleague of hers who owed her a favor agreed to participate in our elaborate deception. And the news went out to Marcus via a tearful phone call from a nurse who told him his wife had passed peacefully in her sleep and he needed to come to the hospital to make arrangements. And I wish I could have seen his face in that moment, but I was hiding in a storage room wearing scrubs I had borrowed, listening to his response through Dr. Chan's phone on speaker, and what I heard was not grief or shock but barely contained excitement, as he said in a voice that tried to sound sad but couldn't quite hide the triumph, "I'll be right there. I need to start making arrangements for the funeral and the estate and everything else." And I knew we had him, because a grieving husband doesn't immediately start talking about the estate. A grieving husband breaks down or goes numb or refuses to believe it's real. But a man who has been waiting for this moment like a vulture circling carrion, he gets down to business, and that's exactly what Marcus did. He arrived at the hospital within 40 minutes, dressed in black, as if he had been preparing his morning outfit for this very occasion. And he played his role beautifully, signing papers with shaking hands that were probably trembling from excitement rather than sorrow, accepting condolences from nurses who didn't know they were participating in a sting operation, and making arrangements. Finally, a kind of hollow defeat, because he knew in that instant that he had lost everything. And the prosecution presented our evidence: the recordings, the photographs, the toxicology reports, the financial documents showing his offshore accounts and life insurance policies. And they called Dr. Chan to the stand, who testified about the arsenic poisoning and our plan to fake my death. And they called me to the stand, where I looked directly at Marcus and told the jury how I had heard him say, "As soon as she dies, all the money is mine," and how I had decided in that moment to become a ghost who could testify at her own murder trial. And the defense tried to argue entrapment and falsified evidence and emotional manipulation, but you can argue with video footage of a man celebrating his wife's death with his girlfriend. You can't explain away arsenic in smoothies. You can justify offshore accounts and secret life insurance policies. And the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and a dozen other charges that would keep Marcus in prison for the rest of his life. And Vanessa, who had been arrested as an accomplice, got 15 years for her role in the conspiracy. And as Marcus was led away in chains, he looked at me one last time and mouthed the word "how," and I smiled and mouthed back because I'm Catherine Westmore and I Dawn. T lose, and that should have been the end of the story, the happy ending where justice prevails and the villain gets his punishment. But life is never that simple, because in the aftermath of the trial, as I tried to rebuild my life and my company and my sense of trust in humanity, I discovered something that changed everything. I discovered why Marcus had really targeted me, and it wasn't just about the money. Marcus's father had been a low-level employee at a tech company. I had acquired early in my career a company where I had to make difficult decisions about restructuring and layoffs to save the business, and one of the people laid off was Marcus's father, who subsequently spiraled into depression and alcoholism and died by suicide when Marcus was 19. And Marcus had spent the next decade planning his revenge, getting into pharmaceutical sales to learn about poisons, meeting me at that conference not by chance but by design, cultivating a relationship built entirely on lies and manipulation, all so he could destroy me the way he believed I had destroyed his father. And when I learned this sitting in my office late at night reading through documents that had come out during the trial, I felt something unexpected. I felt sad, not for myself but for Marcus, because he had wasted his entire adult life on a revenge plot against a woman who had been making impossible business decisions to save hundreds of other jobs, a woman who had actually set up a severance and retraining fund for laid-off employees, including his father, a fund Marcus's father had been too proud to accept. And I thought about how differently things could have been if Marcus had simply told me the truth, if he had come to me and said, "Your company laid off my father, and it destroyed our family." I would have listened. I would have helped. I would have done everything in my power to make amends, because I'm not a monster. I am a person who makes mistakes and tries to do better, but Marcus never gave me that chance. He saw me only as a target, as an enemy, as something to be destroyed, and in destroying me, he destroyed himself, and now he sits in a prison cell for the next 30 years thinking about the fortune he almost had, the life he almost lived, and the wife he almost murdered. And I am free, but freedom comes with scars, and there are nights when I wake up tasting phantom poison in my mouth, when I can trust anyone who offers me food or drink, when I see shadows in doorways and hear footsteps behind me, even when I am alone. And I wonder if the price of justice was worth the loss of my ability to love or trust or believe in the goodness of people. But then I think about that moment in the hospital when I heard those 7 words, and I made a choice not to be a victim but to be a survivor, not to die quietly but to fight back with every weapon I had. And I know that I would make the same choice again, because some battles are worth fighting, even if they leave you scarred, and some truths are worth exposing, even if they destroy everything you thought you knew. And some ghosts need to come back to life to tell their stories, so that other women, other people will know that they too can rise from the ashes of betrayal and become something stronger, something fiercer, something that refuses to be erased. And that is the story of how I died and came back to life, how I turned my husband's murder plot into his prison sentence, and how I learned that the greatest revenge is not death or destruction but survival and truth, because I am Catherine Westmore, and I built an empire once, and I will build it again, and this time I will build it on a foundation of wisdom earned through betrayal, of strength forged in the fire of deception, and of a promise to myself that I will never again mistake charm for character or devotion for love. And if you're wondering whether I've dated since then, whether I've opened my heart to someone new, the answer is not yet, but someday, because I refuse to let Marcus's poison infect the rest of my life. I refuse to let his lies define my future, and I refuse to die, even metaphorically, for anyone ever again, because I already died once and discovered that death, even a fake one, has a way of showing you what matters. And what matters is not money or success or building empires. What matters is living authentically, protecting yourself fiercely, and knowing that when someone shows you who they really are, even if it takes 23 years, you have the power to believe them and to act accordingly, and to ensure that their story doesn't end with your death, but with your resurrection, stronger and wiser than before.